All right. And just put this in now. You're online.
Okay, no problem. I'll be careful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think the last things were all
Wait 1 minute more.
Yeah.
So I see when I go running, so now it's
Yeah, this is
no,
what is over there?
Yeah.
yeah, I do regularly.
Hello everyone, thanks for coming to our CESS seminar, and it's really great to welcome Alexander Cappelen today. And as a great researcher from Norway and doing a lot of varied stuff. Today, Cutthroat's Capitalism versus Cuddly Socialism. Thank you very much, and
Thanks a lot. It's really good to be here. I studied in Oxford for a couple of years, did my MPhil, so it was really strange to come back and walk in Broad Street, going down memory lane. So I'm going to present. So I'm actually going to try to do two things. So I'm going to present a paper that is essentially now is actually accepted finally, but it was almost a pilot study. So it's a 2-country study, but it's going to show the setup for something that's not become a 60-country study. So some of you guys are going to be the first to get a glimpse of the results from the 60-country study where we use the same setup. So I'm going to present the paper, but I'm going to be slightly quicker than I usually would be, so that we can move on to the 60-country comparison and we can discuss that. So that's the plan. So just a little bit before I start on the actual paper presentation, a little bit about the motivation. So the underlying idea we want to study here is the relationship between social institutions and social preferences, essentially. So, and 2 questions that we've been working on in my group. So the group I'm from is called FAIR, or it was previously called the Choice Lab in Bergen, and now it's called FAIR. I'm heading it together with Bertil Tungodden. Everything I do with Bertil, essentially. So when I say we, I would typically refer to him and me. And one issue that we're interested in is essentially how do institutions shape us? Do they? So do we see a difference between institution in social preferences across people who grew up in different institutional settings? And if so, why? So actually, to be honest, I've also added a couple of slides at the end to show that we're trying to look more at the causal determinants of these differences as well in some more recent projects, but we'll see what I can cover of that. So what are we doing in this paper? So the first and most immediate thing we're going to do, we're going to compare 2 countries. 2 countries that are at the extreme, so in OECD, when it comes to income distribution. Norway, actually, in paper we talk about Scandinavia, because Scandinavia, if you've ever been there, they're the same essentially, right? So it's just one more or less the same language. Yeah, it's really frustrating thing in the review process where people someone asks, yeah, but are these different the countries? And we have to kind of explain. Yeah, they are. So it's actually Norway, but I feel very confident that the same would hold if you did it in Sweden and Denmark as well. So we're comparing Scandinavia and the US. So that's but then on top of that, we also study essentially the causal effect. So we have a horse race, so to speak, between 2 reasons why we might want to accept inequality. So one reason is that we just find it fair. This is the right thing because we believe that the source of inequality is acceptable. The other reason is that we find it unfair but it's just damn costly to do something about. And of course, these things have been studied by a lot of other people, but we're doing it in the same experiment, and essentially we can do a horse race more or less between the relative importance of efficiency concerns and fairness concerns in determining inequality acceptance. And on top of that, we are, so that's, I think, maybe the most important contribution is that we also are presenting a new way of doing cross-country comparisons between in economic experiments. So it's really hard, right, to compare. So most when you want to compare results from experiments, how the damn do you do that? I mean, it doesn't make sense to compare lab experiments with the dictator game in the US and in Norway, because the recruitment into these experiments are just completely different. So you want representative samples, and you want it incentivized, and how do you do that? So we have a way of doing that, and we have now, so we did it in 2 countries, now we kind of expanded doing it in 60 countries, but I'll come back to that. Okay, so that's the main thing. So first of all, why do we look at these countries? Well, it's in some sense it's quite fairly obvious. Extremes in the OECD. If you look at all measures of inequality, if you look at the Gini coefficient, for example, they would be at the different extremes. So Norway, Gini coefficient after indisposable income, close to 0.25, close to 0.4 in the US. But also other measures like the fraction of income that goes to the top 1% earners. It's kind of 18, 19, probably now even more percent in the US. It would be between 5 and 8% in the Scandinavian countries. And of course, on top of that, you also have a much more developed social security net in the Scandinavian countries. I don't need to spend much time on that. The question more is, so we know these countries are different. So wouldn't that, in some sense, don't we know the answer already, that these countries also are different with respect to social preferences? No, we don't, obviously, because there could be other reasonable explanations for why the inequality and also the redistribution is so super different in these countries. So, and there are two, and we're not going to argue against this at all. These are 2 plausible stories, and I'm sure it's going to be it's part of the total story. So one reason is that inequality might just be different in these countries. Could be that in Norway everyone is working 8 hours, nobody is working or working very hard, and essentially all the inequality you see is due to luck. Well, in the US, some people work hard, some people work less hard. So this is essentially the story you find in the paper by Alessina Angeletos, Benabu and Terol, essentially saying that Europe and US are in different equilibria when it comes to, so everyone, they have the same fairness views, right? So everyone believed you should reward, all of them are meritocrats, essentially. We should reward differences due to merit, but not due to luck. However, they start up slightly differently. So in Europe, initially, there is more inequality due to luck, which motivates a lot of redistribution, which discourages hard work, which means that the relative importance of luck becomes bigger, and you get more redistribution, and you go that way. Well, the opposite kind of dynamic plays out in the US. So that's the story. Essentially, everything goes through self-fulfilling beliefs about the relative importance of different sources of inequality. That I don't think it's correct, to be honest. But that's not really the point here. So that could be one explanation. Another explanation, of course, that is, I think it's in some sense more plausible, is that the cost of redistribution is higher. So in Norway, for example, it's just ridiculously effective. I mean, the tax system, at least on the face of it. So in these days, we get the tax reports in Norway, and you just get them on your mobile phone. This is ping ping, and they tell you how much you owe. And more than half of the people, they don't even look at the returns. They just say, okay, sure, it's right. Just imagine how efficient that is compared to, and it's typically correct, right? So they're used to this being just a correct system. In the US, you would sit down and say, damn, this can't be correct. And you spend 1 week trying to find mistakes. That's just one example, right? So It's a more efficient system, potentially. So that could be part of it. The cost will be distributed higher. It could also be, and this is the argument, I think this paper is unpublished, but it's was the argument in the Ashimoglu, Robinson, and Verdier paper, essentially saying that Scandinavia is just free riding on the rest of the world because there is an efficiency loss from equalization, and that's hurting innovation. But of course, if you're a tiny little country, it doesn't really matter. But if the engine of growth and innovation in the world tries to implement the same policies, there's going to be less economic growth globally. Again, I don't really believe that story. And if you look at the Scandinavian countries, there is a lot of innovation. So it's, but that, again, that's what we want to do essentially is to say, okay, so these might be explanations. But what about social preferences? Could there also be differences in the fairness views people have? And how do you study that? Well, you put people in identical situations. So you want to, this obviously is the core of experimental method, right? So you want to put Americans and Scandinavians in settings where they know that the source of inequality is the same, and they know that the cost of redistribution is the same. If they do different stuff, then it has to be preferences. So that's very simply the idea. And of course, we can't really causally show that these preferences in turn explain redistributive behavior. But of course, at least it's interesting to see if there is a correspondence between the extent to which you redistribute in a country and the preferences. Okay, so that's the. But we do one more thing, as I said, and that is to also, and this doesn't really have to do with the cross-country comparison necessarily, but we also then can compare how important the source of inequality and the cost of redistribution is. And we think this is a contribution in itself. So clearly there's been tons of studies examining each of these aspects. The importance, so we have done a lot of research on our own side on the importance of the source of inequality. Other people have worked on the cost, how do you make the efficiency equity trade-off. And there is some within, but we are doing between subject comparison of the effect of these two mechanisms. So, and you'll see there are some quite interesting results coming out of that as well in this paper. Yeah.
It's a big point, and I don't want to belabor it too much. And on the cost of redistribution, the example you've given is something incredibly narrow and procedural. It's just like the ease with which you can actually pay your taxes.
Yeah.
That's Scandinavia versus the States. But typically, the cost of redistribution is looked at as something much more broader. So traditional one-on-one economics, there's efficiency costs with thinking about redistributing wealth away, and then we losses there. Sure, you can do for fairness or justice.
Yeah.
But so, are you? If what the example you gave is just a little subset of the larger cost of redistribution that you're imagining, in that case, if that's the case, then I would take slight issue with that, but it'll be
no, and you're going to be totally correct in your assumption. That is, and of course, you need to make a choice. So what we're doing is we are going to have iceberg quotes so it's going to be a leaky bucket story, and there's tons of issues with that. It's clearly the easiest way to represent it, right? And it's the easiest way to kind of explain it to other people. And that's a limitation, and we totally don't want to oversell this. So it's more, especially because our results kind of differ a lot from what other people have found, right? So, and there are some important reasons why, and it's not obvious that our approach is the best, but it's interesting to compare. So we do between. Is that better than within? we do the kind of leaky bucket rather than incentive cost. And so forth. So and also, do people really believe in efficiency cost in an experiment? Because what happens to the money is that it goes back in my pocket. So you have all these issues, right? That I don't think people think that way, but it could clearly argue that it's not really an efficiency loss, right? So you have all these issues, and I totally agree. So I won't oversell it. You'll see exactly how we do. Okay, so the main feature of the design, just to I'm sorry, if, Theodore, you've seen this twice before, I think, or something. So you are allowed to sleep now. No, so you could wait for the 60-country one. I'm sorry for anyone else who might have heard this. Okay, so and this is a design that we've used in a couple of others, quite a few other settings now. A spectator design. So what we do is that we have third parties making distributive choices, real distributive choices, for two other people. So we have workers who actually work to recruit them on Amazon Mechanical Turk. Some people are skeptical to Amazon Mechanical Turk. That shouldn't be a concern here because we're not really relying in any way on their decisions. We're just kind of using them as props so that we can make, so we're not psychologists essentially, right? So we make really, so we're not lying to them. There are actual people that are going to be paid. So they do a job and the spectators decide how to their payments. The workers are recruited on Amazon Mechanical Turk. We actually, in this case, we use the same worker pool for in the US and Norway, and we actually tell them that. So we tell them this is an international labor market to make everything identical, essentially, right? But of course, they could potentially have different beliefs about this pool. So I wouldn't oversell that either. The spectators are the ones we care about, so they're recruited to be, you shouldn't oversell this. They were recruited from the general population, and they're representative along certain very small number of observable characteristics, but there is a lot of heterogeneity, and they're quite similar to the general population. I mean, you can just look at that. And they're recruited by Norstat and Research Now. In the 60-country study that I'm going to talk about, the recruitment is much more serious. Then we collaborate with Gallup World Poll, which is doing they're the gold standard, essentially. So as I said, yeah. Everything here, so we're big fans of pre-planned, so we're doing the I guess a lot of people are, but so we're doing really serious pre-plans, really specifying the hypothesis and how we're going to test them. At the same time, we're not, we are perfectly happy to deviate from the pre-plan if you think that makes sense, as long as we report, and we just report when we do, and we often kind of just add the pre-specified tables, and then people can make up their own minds. So, but essentially everything we do, I think most of here we kept actually very close to the pre-plans. Okay, just a couple of more details. We recruited workers. So the workers worked on 3 different assignments. Actually, what I'm saying now is actually we replicated everything in response to referees. And then we actually also, then we had unique, so in the first round, we tried to do it a little bit cheaper by having each worker work on 3 tasks. And then we made unique pairs. In the replication, that also had, then each worker just did 1 task. It doesn't really matter because what the spectators see is essentially the same. But so they did 2 tasks, and you'll see them come back to them where you don't really measure productivity. They just kind of complete the task, and there's 1 task where you can measure productivity, and that's going to be important for us. After completing the assignment, they were told how earnings would be decided. This is important because they were not told beforehand, and we did that kind of to keep effort the same, or that the spectator shouldn't think that they have been told about this beforehand and kind of tacitly agreed and then adjusted their effort levels, everything. So you'll see the way we're going to determine these bonuses pre-redistribution is going to be totally, that it's going to be a surprise for the workers. Yeah, we recruited 1,334 workers. Each worker then work on 3 assignments, but essentially we create 2,000 unique pairs. Yeah.
So the workers do a task that they know is going to be rewarded somehow, but they don't know exactly how it's going to be rewarded.
Yeah, so they know they're getting a fixed payment. To be honest, right now I have forgotten because we vary a little bit, whether or not we tell them that they might earn more money. We don't tell them that I think it's actually a complete surprise for them. So we tell them you're going to work, and they get a fixed payment. That's all M-Turkers need to do to kind of sign on. And then after completing, we tell them, surprise, there's going to be a bonus, and you'll see how we determine that.
Yeah. There's no incentive for them to do better or worse. In fact, there is an incentive not to do well. You're going to get the same money.
Exactly. So, but you see, what's going to be important for us is not essentially what they're told, but what the spectators are told about what they're told, right? Because that's what's going to be important. So in each country, we recruited 1,000 participants. So we actually, in the final paper, we have twice that number, but it's not important because we replicate it. And they act as spectators, determining distribution. So this is the important thing. We have 3 treatments. So essentially, the story we do, and this is a story, and it's really amazing how easy it is for people to understand it. So I've literally been in a mud hut in Ethiopia, explained this story to people in a slightly simplified language compared to what we have here. But then with a few days, 2 persons worked. At the end, we told them, so take the base treatment. We surprised them and told them it's going to be a bonus for your work, for completing the task. Both had completed the task, done equally well. Okay, so you guys both have done the work, completed the task equally well. It's going to be a bonus. You're going to determine the bonus by essentially flipping a coin, by a lottery. That's going to randomly determine if you get the bonus of $6 or you, and the other gets nothing. So essentially what we do is that we create a surprise inequality reflecting luck. And then essentially we tell this story to someone else. And because we also tell you that you're not going to be told the outcome of this, but someone else is going to be told the outcome. And that person is also going to be allowed to do something about the inequality if he or she wants to. And then essentially what we vary 2 things. We either vary what we tell them about why one got the bonus and the other didn't. And of course, this is truth. And so in one case, it was just a lottery. The other, we gave it to the most productive. So that was, and in this case, so this is not a 2x2, it's kind of we just varying separately one aspect of the situation. This is the efficiency treatment, as we call it. It's just like the luck treatment. So it's still inequality just to luck. But this time for each dollar, so this is the crude way of capturing efficiency. So I apologize for that already. You lose an additional dollar. Yeah.
Just a quick question about the merit. That's knife edge, is it? So if you did slightly better than the other person, you get it all.
Exactly. So this is interesting, right? So it's clear that it's going to be a lot of luck involved here as well. The difference could be tiny, and there's obviously a lot of randomness in who you match with. We have another study together with Björn Bartling where we actually look at that. We give them information about the winning margin, and it turns out people don't care. If you win, that's what matters. How much you win by doesn't matter. But that's a different story. Yeah. Okay. So okay.
Why is it that you put the efficiency treatment only to the luck portion?
No. So that's we didn't have a hypothesis about the interaction. Yeah, so that was and also of course it's yeah. So that was the main reason. Yeah. Yeah.
What?
What?
So who am I being compared against?